been getting a lot of questions about repurposing podcast content. And while I think it's really important to think about how can I use this one piece of content in multiple different ways, I want to start with some of the basics of repurposing and start from there and see what happens. So let's get right to it. Hey y'all, Crystal here today. And like I said, we are talking about repurposing your podcast content. So I recently got back from She Podcast Live 2021. It was such a fantastic conference. And I think that I learned a lot by giving this talk on the 5 keys to repurposing your podcast content. If you want to hear more about the entire talk that I did, the whole presentation, make sure you go listen to the podcast episode you see here. It's going to be linked below in the video description. But I had some really awesome questions that we got when I was doing the Q&A session for this talk. So I thought, why don't we share some of those here today? So the first one is, do you have any tips and tricks to finding great sound bites and remembering where the sound bites are without listening to the whole podcast again? And that comes from Cheryl. So thank you, Cheryl, so much for this question. I love to have a great outline for a podcast whenever I'm recording. And then whenever I go back and I'm editing that podcast episode, I will make a note of, man, that was a really good point. Or this is the thing that my audience needs to hear. Because remember, if you're familiar with sound bites and what they are, I have some videos that you can find here. I'm going to link to them below as well. But a sound bite is really the job of the sound bite is to draw listeners in. It's not to tell them the whole story. That's what the podcast is for. So what you're doing is creating a soundbite that will have a listener say, that was for me. This episode is for me. I need to go check that out right now. Whether they're scrolling on Instagram, they're checking things out on LinkedIn, and they come across your soundbite, you want them to say, I need to go listen to this episode right now. So even if you're recording an episode and you have your notes in front of you, like right now, I just have a Google Doc open, or if you use Asana and that's what you use to plan your episodes, maybe you can make a note whenever you're recording that is like, this is what needs to be the soundbite. If you have a very important point that you've been meaning to make in the episode and you make that point, then go ahead and put a timestamp whenever you're recording, which, let's be honest, it's a little more complicated because you're trying to focus on recording. But whenever you're going back and editing and you have the final edit of your episode, go ahead and write that timestamp down so you know at least where to get started. And for me also, which my episodes are usually between somewhere like 20 to 45 minutes, depending on if it's a solo or an interview episode. But I will mentally remember, I said that at the beginning, or I said that in the middle, or I said it in the end. So I kind of have this mental note already of where this really awesome takeaway was. But at the very least, when you're editing your episode, just write down that important timestamp of where you said something that's going to be impactful to your audience and make them want to go listen to the entire episode. But that's all I have for you today. So if you have any other questions about sound bites or marketing your podcast, make sure you put them in the comments below. I would love to answer your question, just like I answered Cheryl's. And stick around for a few other videos that we're going to be doing about repurposing podcast content, because I think it's really important if you're spending your time and your energy on creating this awesome piece of a podcast episode, then you need to be able to get the most mileage out of it as you can. But that's all I have for you today's video. So make sure you hit the like button if you found this helpful. Subscribe below. That way you don't miss our future videos that we put out all about podcasting and running your online business. Check out these other videos right here, all about podcasting and running your online business. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.